Well, thank you for joining at the top of the hour. We have this series pretty much every month, and it's called the Pathways to Conscious Leadership because we have two minds in the Leadership Guild. Some of us want to define it, and some of us don't. And so what we chose to do is to let individuals share their journey. That's why it's called the Pathways to Conscious Leadership, and to share their journey. And in that way, we understand the notion of conscious leadership from a personal perspective, and it helps inform us about our own definition and the way we chose to work. And today, Mary Gelinas was kind enough to be voluntold, but at the same time embraced. She ultimately embraced the opportunity to share conscious leadership journey. And she'll explain more about the focus and the topic, but ultimately the journey that she's going to describe is part of what we're here to learn. So with that, Mary, I'll turn it over to you. And thank you again for being a forced introvert and being part of today's journey, sharing.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Kim, for this invitation and for all of you who are here today. I appreciate it. And as I said, as you were all coming on, there were only 4 of us at one point. And I said, oh, great, a small, intimate conversation. How perfect for an introvert. I love it. But it's expanded, which is good, but it's still smallish, which I really like. So thanks. Thank you for being here. Let's see, as I begin, I just want to acknowledge some teachers of mine who have really helped me in so many significant ways. First is Angeles Arian, who is a cross-cultural anthropologist who I studied with for well over 20 years before she passed a number of years ago. Also Russell Delman, who is a Feldenkrais practitioner and founder of something called the Embodied Life School. Third is probably Lama Choyang, who is, I'm a Tibetan Buddhist with whom I'm now studying. So I also want to acknowledge my cultural heritage, which is that my mom, Mary Lonergan Gelinas, her mother and grandmothers, my great-grandmother, were immigrants from Ireland. And my father, Ulrich Joseph Gelinas, whose father and grandfather and his mothers before him immigrated many decades, many centuries ago from France, but more immediately from Quebec, Canada. So those are cultural influences in my life. I grew up in Massachusetts, so those influences are very strong in me, the Irish heritage, the French-Canadian heritage. And as we begin, I want to do a guided visualization or guided meditation with you all that I hope will give you a taste of what I'm going to be talking about. So if you want to get into a comfortable sort of upright position on your chair. And if you want to lower or close your eyes, whichever is best for you. So I'd like you to notice your feet on the floor and any sensations you are experiencing there in your feet. Noticing the difference between thinking about your feet and actually sensing into your feet. And is your left foot different than your right foot? And now to notice the sensations of yourself sitting on the chair. And maybe noticing again, is there a difference between kind of your left buttocks and your right buttocks, how you're sitting on the chair? You don't need to do anything or change anything. It's just really a matter of noticing and observing. Now expand your attention to your breathing and noticing where you are experiencing it. In your belly, in your chest, in your head. Can you feel your breath in your legs and in your feet? Now, please deepen your attention or expand your attention, and particularly into your torso. What are you noticing there? What sensations are you aware of? What emotions, thoughts? Might be odd to think of a thought in your torso, but just go with it. Just experiment with that. Emotions that are there, body sensations. And how might you describe this inner space to yourself? And please notice the difference between describing it through interpretation versus direct experience. So, for example, you might describe it as, an interpretation would be I'm excited or I'm anxious. A direct experience might be something like I feel tingling in my belly, or I feel something around my heart. Oftentimes we might not have words for what our deepest experiences are. Now I invite you to expand your awareness into the space around you. 360 degrees. What might you notice there? And how would you describe that space? And as you expand your awareness, did you lose track of your awareness of your interiority? Is it possible to expand your awareness to include that interiority simultaneously? Oftentimes when I'm doing this, I have to ground myself, anchor myself in the interior space, become fully present with that, and then expand outward. And sometimes I go back and forth, because I don't know, whatever it is, my awareness will not allow or is not ready for me to include both. But within a few minutes, I can often sense into both in my interior space and the exterior space. So once again, return to the sensation of your feet on the ground, your buttocks in the chair, breath moving in your body. And when you feel ready to, please raise your eyes or open your eyes. Just when you're ready, take your time. Oh, great. So before I forget, I just want to say something before I move on here with my story. is I want to say something particular to Olivia, who's here, who's a senior in high school, and I just love that you're here. And I think it was 2 weeks ago on a Saturday, I did a workshop for my community here. It was people from all walks of life. And I was doing it on bridging differences. And we had people who are my age and older, and we also had two high school students who are also in Girl Scouts. That's how they happened to hear about the workshop, is through their being in Girl Scouts. And the reason I'm telling you this is because at the end of the day, when we did our closing circle, and the workshop was on what I saw as 5 keys to bridging differences. And it's things you might expect, including listening and speaking, staying connected to the other person, etc., managing your internal state, and being a participating observer, which I'm going to talk about in this talk today. Anyway, this young woman who, like you, but in this case, there were two there. One of them was more outgoing. One of them was much more quiet and introverted. Or shy, I would say. I don't know if she was introverted or shy or whatever. Anyway, she spoke less. In our closing circle, this young woman said, with tears welling up in her eyes, it was so moving to me. She said, I want to practice these skills the rest of my life. It just was like, I said, I was thinking inside, okay, I can die right now. This is it. This is it. I'm done with this young woman. So I feel blessed that you're here, Olivia. So I want to begin with the punchline of my talk, and then I'll tell you how I got here. The punchline is, I believe that consciously being a participant observer is key to being a conscious leader, to bridging differences, and to contributing to life-giving fields of energy and information around us. So that will be the thread of what I'm going to talk about. So let me say a little bit about my punchline, being a participant observer, and then I'll go backwards or forwards or whatever it is, because time does both, right? Being a participant observer is a familiar term in qualitative research. And what it means is that the researcher is both being a participant and an observer, and acknowledging and knowing that his or her presence in a situation as they are observing it is also affecting the situation, just as the situation is affecting them. An important part of it, of course, is what's called reflexivity, meaning you're aware of yourself, you're aware of what's going on around you, which includes recognizing your own biases and assumptions that you're making in your participation as you're making your observations. The term was originally used by a heroine of mine, Mary Parker Follett, who used the term in the early 1900s when she was working as a social worker in Roxbury, Massachusetts. It captured well for her notion of a circular response, meaning that as I say something, it affects you, and as you say something, it affects me. She was very interested in understanding what she called total situations. We might think of it now as understanding the systems that she was operating in. That would be our language probably today. So here I acknowledge and build on her work and expand the term beyond its role in qualitative research. So to include the moment-to-moment dynamic and evolving relationship between what is occurring inside us and what is occurring outside us, around us. So although I use the term participant observer in the description of this session, as I prepared for this, I began thinking that term wasn't quite right, that it really is participating observer, because it is so alive in our living reality, which is constantly changing. So for me, this involves being able to consciously and simultaneously track the spaces inside and around us, which is why I did the guided meditation I did, about how to make conscious choices, about how to nudge circumstances forward in life-giving ways. For example, when you're in a toxic situation, how do you shift it? As Maria Popova, who some of you may know, she does the blog Marginalia. I love what she said. She said, I don't think it's possible to contribute to the present moment while being engulfed by it. Isn't that interesting? I don't think it's possible to contribute to the present moment while being engulfed by it. Engulfed by it. For me, it's all about when we get engulfed when we get triggered or flooded, or some of the terms people use, when our more primitive brain gets triggered and we go into a self-protective mode. Okay, so that's my intro. That's the punchline. So let me tell you how I got there. So some of you, I think, may have heard this story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who spent time in the forests of the Berkshire Mountains in Western Massachusetts. And this little girl would sing to God, sing to Saint Teresa, sing to Jesus, when she was a little girl in those woods. Although she was aware that this was her happy place, she didn't know that the forest itself was shaping her interior space. Of course, she wasn't aware. What was I? I was like 7, right? 7 or 8 or something like that. And that forest was sending her implicit messages about who she was really and is. Although she certainly did not have language for it, she was experiencing the noetic field, the field energy and information available to us in nature and in the cosmos. So fast forward through years of self-doubt, in part by growing up in a family who appeared to think that Mary, or me, was perhaps a bit odd, too emotional. And although I did not have words for it at the time, I realized I was always looking to understand what people were thinking, how they were feeling, what they cared about, what was meaningful to them. So this did not go over well with my parents or my siblings. My little questioning mind, asking everybody questions all the time. As the youngest of 4 children, what I started to do was withdraw from family conversations because I was afraid of being perceived as too odd, too intrusive. What's wrong with her? And I spent time in forests, in the oceans, in lakes. I would climb trees with my books and hang out there, talk to the birds, be in that space. That was where I found my happy place. And where I felt who I really, truly was inside, deeply connected to a larger reality. From there through college, I went to college during the tumultuous 1960s, the Vietnam War years. So I was studying to be a journalist, and I was covering anti-war demonstrations that were both peaceful and very violent. And I also had the great privilege of interviewing amazing people like Betty Shabazz, widow of Malcolm X, Dr. Timothy Leary, Senator Eugene McCarthy. I mean, I was 19 years old. What did I know? I knew nothing. But I knew that I was drawn to people who were making a difference in the world, and I wanted to understand who they were and how they became who they were. So choosing to ignore my college graduation, much to the chagrin of my parents, I headed to Europe, where I had a job working with the high school age students that were the children of the diplomatic corps and the military who were stationed in Europe at the time. And I was actually in Munich shortly after the terrorist attack at the Olympics in 1972. It was an intense social field. Again, I didn't have the language for it. I just knew that I was affected by that environment. Most of these students were world travelers, because of who their parents were. They traveled all the time. So when I chaperoned them on a trip we were on a ship that was also a school, and we went through Scandinavia, St. Petersburg, I realized how little they knew about themselves. And so though I didn't have a language at the time, I began my career in organization and personal development in my early 20s. So I'm just going to ask you, as I continue with my story, for you to notice what is going on inside you. I'm basically inviting you to be a participating observer right now. So what's going on in your thoughts, your body sensations, your emotions as you listen to me? And what do you notice arising among us as we are together and you're listening to me? Which I hope you're listening to me. Thank you. You look like you are. So I'm grateful for that. So after completing my residency for my doctorate at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, I moved because I got offered a job in Berkeley, California. For those of you who right, the difference between the culture of the New England to California. Wild, right? I mean, the difference. It seemed I had found a second home where I felt really more at home here. So in 1978, I finished my doctoral work and freelanced for a number of years before joining a consulting firm based in San Francisco called Interaction Associates. And I spent 10 years doing work I love, flying around the United States, Europe, Canada. My life changed significantly in 1986 when I was hospitalized for significant debilitating radiculopathy emanating from narrow discs in my neck. Like many before me, a health crisis changes one's life, as Lewis, I know you're very aware of. The neurosurgeon read the MRI results and recommended surgery on my neck, removing discs and fusing vertebrae. Fortunately, my primary care doctor, Michael Smith, was not convinced. I can still hear his voice on the phone when he said to me, "I am not convinced surgery is needed. We need to understand what this means." So I can get even full in my heart just remembering this. "We need to understand what this means psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually, in addition to physically." It changed my life in that moment. He did those words. It is only in hindsight I now understand that his words were leading me back to that little girl in the woods, feeling a part of something larger than myself that was also moving inside me. Thus began a quest through multiple modes of healing until I realized that in addition to searching outside myself, I needed to go inside to heal myself. This ultimately led me to 3 modes of healing that made all the difference that I still practice today: meditating, shamanic journeying, and Feldenkrais awareness through movement practices. I have never had back or neck surgery. An instrumental part of this process was creating a women's healing circle that stayed together for over 20 years. Karen Buckley, who I think most of you know, was part of that circle and remains an important part of my life. Working for several decades as a consultant, process designer, facilitator, and coach, I knew that considering the total situation was simply part of the job. What I had glimmers of, but mostly did not appreciate, was how my inner state was affecting how I was functioning, my behavior, my breathing, my words, and also affecting those around me. That part I didn't understand. I also did not recognize how the social fields in which I was operating had their own energy and information that included not only the dynamics of the current moment, but also the histories of the land on which I was working, and including the architecture and trappings of the spaces in which I was working. For example, consider the difference of working in conference rooms in a Catholic hospital in Kansas, conference rooms at an automobile manufacturer in Detroit, Michigan, and in the redwood forests of Northern California. I mean, even as I say those things, can you feel a shift even inside yourself as you imagine what those spaces were? So enter the golden age of brain science in the 1990s. So with the creation of a particular technology, functional magnetic imaging, we could now look at the living brain and look at correlations between what was going on in the brain and human behavior. And notice I said the word correlation, not causation, because that kind of knowledge about the human brain, we still don't understand, as David Chalmers, the philosopher and cognitive scientist, described it, the hard problem of consciousness. We don't necessarily understand it in a physical sense, right? This was also the time when we had growing proof of neuroplasticity and the impact of our thoughts, our emotions, the environment on the brain. The brain is the only organ in the human body that changes itself. And we have a role to play in how the brain changes itself. So what the research then, and that continues today, points to is how our internal state or personal field affect the spaces or fields around us and vice versa. This in turn influences the groups and organizations we lead or support. And my first book, Talk Matters, kind of summarizes that research and how we can use it to design more collaborative processes. So 2 additional events led me to the power of consciously being a participating observer. First, my husband and I, my business partner, Roger James, we moved from the San Francisco Bay Area to the far reaches of way Northern California, almost into Oregon, in the redwood forest. Working in this rural area helped me realize that this county of Humboldt County, which is where I am, has 135,000 people. Well, intriguingly enough, it's the same size as most of the corporations that I was consulting to. So it was interesting to think about how Humboldt County was the same size as Carrier Corporation or Chevron or Pacific Gas and Electric. It was like, oh, I get this. You know, this is a system. This is a whole large system. Being in a rural area and working with smaller organizations of various sectors, like small businesses, government, healthcare, along with elected officials like mayors, county supervisors, and tribal leaders. There are 9 tribes in Humboldt County. The land here is very full of that indigenous wisdom and the trauma that they've all gone through. So being here enabled me to more clearly understand the impact of decisions on residents, along with the impact of less than ideal processes on the qualities of those decisions, ones involving water use, housing, transportation, and healthcare, to name a few. They were less than ideal because they did not consider the total situation or the total system, nor the social field in which they were occurring. This social field includes the energy and information still living here in this land from the resource extraction economy that existed here for generations. Think redwood forests and fish, along with the near total genocide of the Wiyot people on whose unceded land I live and work. The line of sight, this is so intriguing to me, the line of sight between decisions made in ineffective processes and its impact are more discernible, I discovered, in a rural area, much more discernible than in urban areas because the dynamics are so multiple and overwhelming. The interconnectedness is harder for me to see in an urban area than in a rural one. The second event occurred in 2018 at a conference convened by David Sibbett and Gisela Wendling of Grove Consulting, where I connected with Alan Briskin, who had been studying fields for decades. His focus on fields was a lightning bolt of insight for me. Perhaps this was, if not the missing link, an important missing link in my work. How might the discoveries of Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell into electromagnetic fields in the late 19th century and the work of all quantum physicists since Max Planck in 1900 help me better understand the interconnectedness and interrelatedness of our inner state and the settings, situations, and environments in which we operate, along with how those are all affecting us, our body sensations, emotions, thoughts, and behavior. I like how theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli describes this reality. Quote, the best description of reality we have found is in terms of events that weave a web of interactions. Everything is only what it is with respect to something else. I'm going to read that again. The best description of reality we have is in terms of events that weave a web of interactions. Everything is what it is, only with respect to something else. This is a revolutionary idea, that what is true at the microscopic level is also true at the macroscopic level. In other words, in fields that some of you have already heard me talk about. So this meeting between Alan and I began a 6-year journey of conversations, dreams, and secondary research into fields, the space where interactions take place that is filled with energy and information, like just right now. During our explorations, we created a particularly enlivening and emerging field among us that comes to fruition this summer with the publication of our book. The most important part of this journey for me has been deepening my understanding, and I should say experience also, of the breathtaking dynamism of our world and our relationships. Second, developing the ability to read fields through a kind of expanded interoception into my body. So what I want to propose is for us is why I wanted to do that meditation in the beginning is I think being able to track our inner physiological sensations, all of that, is not only about sensing what's going on for us. I believe it is a way to also sense what is going on with people around us and in the space that we're in. And the third reason this journey has been so important to me is to develop the various ways I can nudge fields by managing my internal state and by consciously choosing how to shift the fields around me by what I say and do even if this means simply being quiet, still and quiet. These abilities, I believe, are core to consciously being a participating observer. To observe what is happening outside, we need awareness of what is happening within. During these 6 years, I also took a deep dive into the work of Mary Parker Follett, the too often unsung hero of social psychology, who Peter Drucker described as the prophet of management. It was her work, along with my studies and practice of meditation, Feldenkrais, and focusing, that led me to the essential role of consciously being a participating observer. We are all at once the observer, the observed, observing, while also actively participating in the evolution of ourselves and the situations we're in. Maya Angelou describes it thusly: we are at once composer and composed. We are at once composer and composed. So when people talk about we are all in this together, or we are all one, I tend to take a step back, pause, and wonder whether when I say that or anyone else says it, if we truly understand what either of the phrase or that word means in a deeply interconnected and relational world. Saying we are all in this together means more than just being together economically, socially, or culturally. We are truly interconnected and interrelated in ways that are often invisible to us at both the macroscopic and the microscopic levels. For example, early research is finding, this is fascinating to me. This is so fascinating. I just love it. The early research is that the neurons in our brain, in addition to communicating directly through synapses and neurotransmitters, are also communicating through electromagnetic fields. So this is an indirect communication. So those electromagnetic fields are inside and around us. This is called ephaptic coupling. The implications of this are astounding to me. It means that we communicate not just through words, gestures, tone of voice, etc. We're also communicating, likely unconsciously, with one another through the electromagnetic fields in which we are embedded. Robin Wall Kimmerer describes it as the world spills over into us and we spill over into the world. And the notion that we are one does not, for me, make sense because we are in a relational world. We are both one and not one. As Suzuki Roshi described it, not one, not two. I have meditated on these words for a long time. I am simultaneously a separate, unique being and an evolving part of an immense living reality. I am participating in oneness, while also being able to observe the process of being with oneness. It is relational. When we experience ourselves in both these ways, separate and a part of a larger cosmos, we are in the noetic field. This all brings me back to the young Mary singing to God in the forest and to consciously being a participating observer. I am participating in a relational field as I am also observing and being with it, so I can make conscious choices about how to enter and direct the flow of energy and information inside me and around me. I don't experience this as a duality. I don't experience this as a duality. For me, it is an integrative awareness that is not one, not two. So let's take a few more minutes as I'm closing here to tune into yourself again if you haven't been doing this already. and perhaps now in maybe a more discerning and nuanced ways, the same questions as before. What sensations are you feeling? What emotions are coming up? What memories, stories, or thoughts are arising? In other words, what's going on in your personal field, and what do you notice about what is emerging in our social field? So let's just take a couple seconds of quiet, 30 seconds of quiet. I'll offer this blessing, which I sometimes remember to say, but it's on my wall, so I'll read it to you. This is from John O'Donohue. The poem is Benacht, meaning blessing. And I'm sure many of you have heard this. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. So thank you very much for this. Has been a wonderful experience for me. So thank you very much. And I love being with all of you, of course. So Kim.
Mary, thank you so much for extending yourself and sharing with us your own personal journey. And I, for one, was waiting to hear about the swimming experience in Indiana, but uh,
What?
your college swimming days.
Oh, right. Oh, in Wisconsin, Madison,
Yes, was
Wisconsin.
Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
all right, right.
Well, yeah, that'll be another
A
time.
different, another time. Connection to water, connection to
Connection to
water,
water.
nature. Yes, yes. So thank you so much. I appreciate your preparation and your deep connection to everything that you've experienced so far and being able to articulate that with us and for us. So thank you.